Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the number 50-something, I don't know, of Zoom sessions that we've had since lockdown. This is the 11th session. I'm very pleased that we have Sean Harris, who's one of the business leads in Kinetic Consulting, a colleague of mine, and he's going to be talking about leadership and what we can learn from a business perspective on from the military on business leadership. And I've seen this presentation a couple of times, and it is very good. If you can, I'll be recording it as you know. It'll be on the site, the YouTube site as well, and we'll post a link to it as soon as it comes. So if you would like to I'll hand over to you, Sean. You should be able to share your screen now. And we've got one more person joining. So yeah, if you introduce yourself and off you go.
Good morning, everyone. Hello. My name's Sean Harris, as Chris said. I'll give you a brief introduction to me, and then I'm going to show you where I am with this rather sort of chintzy wallpaper behind me. And then I'll take you through a few things that I think business leaders can learn from the military and from the world about leading in challenging times. So, right, so my name's Sean Harris. My background is a long time ago, because I'm catching on now. I did a degree in psychology. I then spent 8 years in the British military. After my degree, I went to Sandhurst and became an officer in the infantry. I was in the regiment now, the light infantry, now part of the rifles, and I commanded British infantry soldiers all over the world. My last 2 years there, I spent as an instructor at the School of Infantry at Warminster. So I was a specialist in heavy weapons, particularly mortars, and made the natural progression from there into advertising. It's a well-trodden path from the military into advertising. It's not really. I think I was about one of the few people who have ever done it. So I went to work for a big advertising agency in London called TBWA. They've always got lots of initials, and I worked there on accounts like NatWest Bank and PlayStation, early on the Sony video games consoles. I left there after a year and went and set up, because I thought I can probably do this for myself. How hard can it be? With the arrogance of youth, off I went. I went with a business partner. We set up our own business. We ran it very happily together for 10 years, and it had its ups and downs as small businesses, but we did reasonably well. We sold that business. I set up a new one in the telecom sector, particularly working in making applications for brands in mobile phones. I sold that after 5 years. I took a year out because I was fortunate enough not to have to work for a bit. And I've known the owner of Kinetic Capability for years, Will Hogg. We served together in the military. We were having lunch and he said, "What are you going to do next?" And I said, "Well, I've always been fascinated by leadership. And I had an idea around doing something in the leadership space, and we talked about it. He said, "Well, I want to do something like that." So I was brought in to work at Kinetic. I head up, as Chris said, one of the 3 business streams there. I've been there for 2 years. So Gus, who you saw the other week, is in my team, and I'm responsible for the Kinetic Capability, which is the training side of capability. And the particular area that I work in with a lot of corporates, so our clients include people like Procter & Gamble, Caterpillar, Firmenich, and various other large multinationals. And we work with them developing their leadership. Because my experience of being back inside a PLC, when I sold a company into a PLC, and I've been out of normal business, being a large company for 10 years, I found it quite an experience being back in a large organization. I didn't particularly appreciate some of the management styles I experienced whilst I was there. So I thought if I could go out and improve the quality of the way that people manage others and lead within large organizations, I could make more of their subordinates happy than any other way of improving people's lives. So that's what I'm interested in doing, is improving the quality of leadership within large organizations. And now I said I'd say where I am. So I'm very pleased this is on Zoom, because I've been sleeping outside for 3 days, preparing for a course we run for 3 weeks in September. So I've just come in from quite a damp night out, where we're taking clients up to where we were doing a bit of mountaineering and a bit of sleeping out with them during the first 3 weeks of September. And where they'll be doing it is here. And hopefully everyone can see out the window. So can everyone see that? Thumbs up if you can, please. Brilliant. So that is, I can shut the window now. So that is Coniston in the Lake District. It's one of the most beautiful parts of the country. It's particularly good for providing challenging weather, as it rains quite often. So in September, we'll be taking a group of young undergraduates for a large family-owned retail business. And we take some of their young family members up into the Lake District for 3 weeks with an aim to develop character and help them decide which of those young people at sort of 18 to 19 has some leadership potential and who requires further development. And it's a similar method to the British Army uses to look at young officers and look at who has the ability to lead others and who becomes a bit annoying when they're cold and wet and tired and stops thinking about others and starts thinking about themselves too much. So does that make sense? Anyone got any questions they'd like to ask before I start? No? Okay, well, thank you. Right, I'm going to share a screen now and I'll take you through my presentation. Can everybody see my screen? Brilliant. Thank you for letting me know, because it's always a bit worrying on this end. Thank you. So what can business leaders learn from the military leaders' approach to crisis is what I'd like to discuss for the next sort of 40 minutes or so. So, thinking back to the German invasion of Western Europe in 1940. Now, from a military point of view, this was an incredible achievement. For everyone involved, it was a complete disaster and an awful period in history. But what the Germans did at that time was amazing. In 6 weeks, starting on May 10th, 1940, in only 6 weeks, the Germans managed to conquer Holland, Belgium, France, and be on the edge of conquering Britain in only 6 weeks. Now, what was different about them and what had happened before was the first of 5 principles I'm going to share with you. So this is the first one. So what was special about this was they developed a theory called mission command. Now, what do I mean by mission command? Now, people's perception of the military is it's full of people who shout at one another, and everyone likes sort of marching around and ironing and not thinking. But in fact, the job I used to do in the infantry is almost the complete opposite of that. Because Alan made the point earlier on about the military saying, well, you know, at least you've got a gun and you can make people do things. But actually, everybody's got a gun. Everyone you're in charge of has weapons as well. So people only will do things if they believe in what you're saying. So the first one is mission command, is every team member needs to be crystal clear on the objective, and then you let them decide what they're going to do. So I'd like you to imagine now you've got a new team member joining your organization. So you've got a new team member coming into your team. So when you've got a new team member coming into your team, what you're unlikely to do, and I'll just show you this here, is there's 2 different styles in the way you can lead. You either can be quite directive by someone, and what I mean by that is that you give them very little freedom of movement. You say, this is what I want you to do, this is how I want you to do it, and this is when I want it done by. Well, the mission command style over on the other side is where you say to an individual, this is what I'd like you to achieve, but how you do it is totally up to you. So when you're being very directive with someone, that's where you have low trust, but that trust is due to you probably never worked with them before. They've never worked with you. And what you should be aiming to do as leaders is to move your style from a directive style where you're telling people exactly what to do to a more mission command style where you're telling them, this is my intent, this is what I want to happen. How you do it is up to you. Now, corporates talk a lot about mission and vision, but this is what organizations mean by mission and vision. It's setting what it is you want someone to achieve, but not telling them how to do it. Now, that's absolutely crucial. And as you move through a medium trust and then up to high trust between you and the person who works in your team and within your teams, what happens is that you start to be in a position where that you have high trust with them and they have high trust with you. And at that point, you're able to let them get on with it. But the most key point about this sort of management style is that as you push authority down to the people who work within your teams, you have to take responsibility upwards. Because they need to know that if something goes wrong, you have their back. And most importantly, you won't let them down and that they have full cover from you. This is a really important point, that as responsibility goes down, as authority goes down, responsibility goes up. Because if you don't let people have the confidence to make mistakes, and I'll come back to this later on, they're not going to innovate. And I've seen this, we see this often in our corporate clients, that people misunderstand about this style. It's not about letting people make loads of mistakes. It's giving them the freedom to operate to the best of their ability, and you assisting them. And it can be summed up as aligning on the big and trusting on the small. So aligning on the big and trusting on the small. There's a lot to think about here. Another way of looking at this is that you can spend your whole time worrying too much about the detail of the plan. And as you get more senior within organizations, you have to be in a position to devolve a lot of authority and a lot of decision making to people within the teams below you. But by making sure each team member is crystal clear on your objective and letting them decide the how, you're able to be much more flexible. There's lots of different ways of summarizing that, but another example of that is saying planning is good, but plans in themselves are useless, because you need to provide your subordinates a sort of North Star, something that they're trying to achieve, because as the situations they're operating in change, they're not going to have a chance to talk to you about it often. They have to be able to make decisions for themselves. And back to this area of feeling in a safe place and trusted, they'll only decide to innovate if they feel they can do it without repercussions, without danger for them personally. There's two different ways of looking at that. There's a German general. So when I was in the British Army a long time ago, you used to have a waterproof Filofax, if any of you are old enough to remember one of those. You had a waterproof Filofax, and it was tied by a bit of string to your jacket, and it sat inside your jacket. And in the front of this book, it was full of pieces of waterproof paper reminding you how to do things for when you were very tired, and lots of data and information, the sort of thing you'd look up on a phone now. But on the front, it had a quote from a German general called General von Moltke. And his quote said, and I always remember it, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. No plan survives first contact with the enemy. And Mike Tyson, the rather famous boxer, summed it up nicely as well, I think a bit more pithily. He said, everyone's got a plan until someone punches you in the face. So, violent language, but the point is it's about letting your subordinates have the freedom to maneuver, but your responsibility as a leader is to set them clear direction and then let them get on with it. Clear enough so far? Is the pace okay? Can everyone hear me? Good, thank you. Okay, on to the next one. We're gonna have a bit of an exercise now. So, over the last few months, I've certainly got better at cooking than I had been before. So I've been stuck at home with my family much more than I normally am. And it's one of the nice things is us all been eating together. I don't know what everyone's different experience has been like, but that's been one of my experiences. So what I'd like you to do for the next 30 seconds is think about a recipe that you've got down. So Gus, who you saw the other week when he was presenting with Chris, he told me he has got a hamburger recipe, which he has completely nailed now, and his children will eat it every time without any complaint. And they love it. So I'd like you to write down for the next 30 seconds the recipe you have that is your surefire winner. And then we're all going to share it with one another. So your 30 seconds begins now. Remember what the ingredients are, how you prepare it, how long it takes to cook. You need to put it in the oven, you need to put it on a grill. This is all the information you're going to need to share with other people in the group. And you're only going to have 30 seconds to get over the information. So we've still got another 10 seconds to go to get it written down. And then we're all going to share our recipes with one another. Okay, that's the end of our 30 seconds. So what I'd like you to do now, so I'd like you to make sure you've got your notes in front of you. I'd like everyone to come off mute. So if everyone can come off mute, please. Very well done, thank you. Okay, what I'd like you all to do now is take in a deep breath, and then I'd like you to share your recipe with all the other 20 people. Ready, steady, go. So what I like is
what I would like to do is
flour, salmon with veggies and salmon and grill it on the pan.
Cocoa, mix it all together, get a lovely birthday cake.
mold the beans around
For 5
Bake
minutes on one
cake,
side and 5 minutes on
2
the other
eggs,
side.
throw milk or buttermilk, pinch of salt,
The sauce
vanilla paste,
for choosing, I
mix it
usually
all
like
together, give
spicy
it a good mix,
sour
no lamb,
sauce.
put it into a frying pan until
Mix
it's
it
nice
1
and
tablespoon
brown.
of
Make sure you tip it over for the next one and keep doing. You can do the big pancakes or the small pancakes.
stop.
thank you, everybody.
Oh, God.
Well done, everyone. I mean, that went really well. That was really good.
You can go back on mute now, please.
Nicola Hardy, just to pick on someone I've never met before. Nicola, what recipe did you hear there you liked the most of other people's?
There's a lot of cakes being made.
Yes, good.
So I got the cakes.
Were any you were able to write down at the time? No. Rachel.
No.
Rachel Smith, did you get any really? Did you hear Chris's one? It was quite good. Did you get it? Okay. Okay, so right, the point there is if everybody talks at once, no one can hear what's going on. Thank you very much, everyone. You all did really well. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Rachel. You did really well there. Chris's recipe was great for those who could hear it.
It was toast, okay?
Thank you.
I don't cook. It was toast with Marmite.
Yes, I saw you. I saw you at all, but I wasn't going to. It was by voice only at all. That's not quite the task. But thank you. So the point I'm trying to make there, and the second point after mission command, is something the military call clear the net. Now, by the net, what the military you mean is use of the radio. We talk about a radio net. Now, the thing about most communication systems, and it's particularly true with radios, is everyone cannot talk at once. Only one person can talk. And also in the radio net in the military, there's a lot of information, just like in everyday business life, there's a lot of information going around. It's all important to someone, but a lot of it is irrelevant to the main thing that's going on, this North Star. What are we trying to do? And one of the biggest challenges as a leader is refraining from adding to the noise. I'd like you all to think now a little bit about this COVID period we've been through, and have a think about leadership, be it in business or be it political, where people have been simply adding to the noise and not setting the objectives. So I can see nearly all of you, but not all, sadly. I'll just make this you guys bigger so I can see more. Would anyone like, so I'd like you to think about that for a few seconds, and then I'd like one or two of you to share people who've been adding to the noise and not setting clear mission command. Would anyone would like to share an example with the group? I can see nearly all of you, I think. Catherine Bailey.
My bugbear at the moment is the government's idea on face masks. And then all the conspiracy theories that are coming up about why people shouldn't wear them. There's no clear message. It's not that difficult. Put one on, you know, and that's quite easy. It doesn't affect the oxygen levels. If you've got an exemption, fine, but just be clear.
Thank you, Catherine. So just be clear with everyone. Has anyone else got another one for me? Thank you.
Yeah, on the face mask thing, this whole clear the net thing. Boris says one thing, and then Michael Gove does something completely different.
It's completely
I
infuriating.
find that completely, unbelievably ignorant in terms of leadership.
So, for this area of clear the net, we talked earlier about mission command, and I talked about align on the big and trust on the small. Now, your job leader is you're setting the big, and then letting others get on with it. So you have to have the self-control to know when to put in information and when not to talk. And some people find that really tricky in crisis. And I think over the last few months, we'll see people in business who've talked too much and people who've not talked enough. I think the group who've talked way too much are estate agents who've emailed me almost daily during lockdown with nothing to say. An industry that had nothing to do for 2 months. They should have all just gone on holiday and been quiet, but they didn't. So I thought even less of them than I did before. I didn't think that was possible. So that is clear the net. Sorry, I was just trying to make you all smaller there. I went on to my next one. Right, the next of my three here, warnings to any military historians here and fans of French military history. I'm about to debunk and criticize one of the great French military leaders. Would anyone like to tell me who the gentleman on a white horse is at the front? Any keen students of history out there who might be able to tell me who this person is?
It's Napoleon, isn't it?
Napoleon, thank you very much. It is Napoleon. Napoleon Bonaparte, an incredible French military leader. He is famously quoted as saying an army marches on its stomach. An army marches on its stomach. Has anyone ever heard that phrase? Yes. Yes. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it. And I'm happy enough to say that. I don't think an army marches on its stomach. I think it marches on something else. Would anyone like to have a go at what they think it marches on? And join me in debunking Napoleon.
Motivation.
Motivation, very good, thank you.
Objective.
A more emotional word.
Right.
Objective.
Pride, good.
Purpose.
Yeah.
Purpose. What binds a family together?
Love.
Love. What a great word. Thank you. Who was that? Yvette. Thank you. What a great word. It's love. An army marches on love. And if you read any book, I very rarely read military books. I've just read a brilliant book about the Vietnam War called Matterhorn, written by a man who took 40 years to write it. He was an English student at Oxford University in the 60s. He was an American. He dropped out to join the Marine Corps. He didn't have to. And he fought in Vietnam for 2 years. And his book Matterhorn is amazing. And that's the theme of it. He fought in terrible jungle with his comrades, almost the pointlessness of it. And yet the thing that runs through it, this theme, is love and support for one another. Now, why am I talking about that for business? Because the kind of love you have in the military is rather like parental love. So it's a tough love where you're doing it for the good of the mission that you're trying to do and also for one another. And I think business love is really similar.
Mm-hmm.
What you're trying to do with your teams is make them better. And sometimes to do that, you're going to be moving someone out of a team. Sometimes you're going to be telling people things they don't want to hear. Sometimes you're going to have to make some really tough decisions. Now, an example of that for me would recently be the governments of all countries making the decision to go into lockdown. Now, that's tough love. They knew they were going to destroy their economies for a period of time, but they did it to protect everyone else. And there are a lot of people who'd have been saying don't, but they carried on and they did it. And as a leader, the only way you can really work on tough love is by connecting with the people you work with and connecting with them as people rather than as job roles. And as people get more senior in organizations, that gets more difficult to do because they have less time working with people as individuals, but it's absolutely crucial. And again, it's something I think the military do really well, having worked in both environments, and it's something the corporate world could do more. And I think this time of crisis is showing that even more. Teams where people are taken out of their workplaces, they need the comfort and solidarity of their work team more. And I think love is the right sort of area to be working in, so it's tough love. So I wasn't going to go into Lencioni's models because I think we're doing too well. I can see everyone's faces, everyone's still with me. So what I'd like you to think about for a couple of minutes is, what does tough love mean to you? And I'd like you to think about, what are the barriers to tough love in the corporate world? And what piece of advice might you give to a client or to a colleague to build tough love in their team? So I'll just give you a couple of minutes to think about that. And then I'm going to ask a couple of you to share your thoughts with the group. See, there's lots of pensive thinking going on there. Very good. It's an interesting expression, tough love. So what are the barriers in organizations, and what piece of advice we give to a client or to a colleague to get tough love in their team? We've got about another 30 seconds. And it's the confidence to tell others what you really think about their performance, and really importantly, for them to tell you how you're doing and what it is you do well and where are your opportunities to improve. Okay, so that's 3 minutes. So I'd just like a couple of you to share. I'm just gonna, would anyone like to volunteer before? I can't see everyone, so Chris, please give me a hand.
Can I volunteer?
Please do.
Right. To me, tough love means going over and beyond, being able to be honest, completely honest with your team members, caring for one another, and that means actually taking time out to find out what's going on with them, giving them support where needed and guidance, and allowing them to use their skills to excel, encouragement in other words. Barriers to that might be corporate structural policies, where people are all seen as being in the same pot with no differentiation. There might be, and my advice would be to care and support for each other, the team, and the team will in turn care and support the company.
Lovely, thank you. Oh, I can't see your Christian, your first name. I just see C. Leadley.
Cherie.
Cherie, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to have a go? I just can't see you all. Is anyone else putting their hand up?
Hello, it's Natalia here. Can I just add something to just Cherie just said? Hello.
Hello, Natalia.
I had a very similar to what Cherie had, but I think for me also quite important as a piece of advice, I think is equality, to treating your team very much equal and treating the same with the same equal respect.
Yes.
Which I think is also, quite also very important, especially obviously your team have got different ability, they are different characters as well. So I think by having the equal respect and sort of, you know, and also as you mentioned stuff with also further we discussed, I think clear messages and clear objective as well makes so much stuff, everything easier as well.
And thank you, Natalia. And there is something parental in that, isn't there, of being clear about what you want someone to do, being clear on the standards with them, letting them know how they're doing in a non-emotional way, which I know is difficult.
That's correct. And I think sometimes I've got like a stuff person, but as I said, that some things sort of, that obviously we in John Lewis do, we always sort of got this approach of good news, bad news, good news. So even if you have to deliver something that sort of for them that it could be like constructive criticism, but there's always this sort of, you need to soften it by something else rather than it's very much negative throughout. I think it's always good to sort of maybe start quite nicely, then give them something to maybe improve on, and then sort of reiterate to whatever they're doing is great as well. So I think it's just little making it still constructive, but yet then let them know there's something obviously improvement to be made.
Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so again, I'm fascinated by tough love as a thing, because it's interesting when we talk about leadership, it often comes down to people, and which is all about emotions, which again is slightly surprising. I think people think of the military as being terribly macho and all the rest of it, but love is a really key word there. Okay, so that's my third point for you. Make you all a bit smaller again. So we're leading with tough love, and it's all about true trust and respect and earning the right to lead. Okay, so my fourth one I'm going to share with you is about energy. Can anyone tell me who this gentleman is here? Does anyone know who he is? I'll give you a clue.
One of
His
the marathon
name-
runners.
Say again?
Wasn't it? I want to pronounce it as Kikoji, I think.
Yes, exactly right. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
It's the world record holder for the marathon.
Exactly right, exactly right. And I think one of the most cliche-ridden phrases in the world is they talk about things being a marathon, not a sprint. A marathon, not a sprint. People say that all the time. But actually, what are we trying to say? And I think the military do it quite well. So there are a couple of different groups of people here. They're not all soldiers. I just showed some people doing things which are going on for quite a long time is the key. And what the military are good at doing is turning it up and turning it down, turning it up, turning it down. If any of you have got friends who've been in the military, one thing they normally share in common is they can go to sleep just about anywhere. So if you look at these soldiers, the soldiers from the US Airborne, they're going in to attack a building in Afghanistan in a plane, they're about to be delivered, and they're all asleep. Because they know they might not sleep for a bit longer. So they're sleeping now before they get there, because they might not sleep for 2 days solid when they get there. If you look at the medical crew here, this was a picture taken in Italy. They stopped the medical crews going home. They said, there's no point. Sleep here. It's vital that you sleep. We've got to look after you. Just go to sleep here. We'll wake you up in 8 hours and go back to work. The firemen were in China fighting a forest fire. They've been working for 36 hours. They're exhausted and they have to go to sleep. But as a leader, the crucial thing is that you marshal your resources. If you burn out your staff, you won't get any more. If you blow all your money, you won't get any more. And the thing that when people say it's a marathon, not a sprint, what they mean is turn it up, turn it down. There's an exercise which the British military run at Sandhurst, and it is, no one who does it ever forgets it. It lasts for a week. You turn up on the exercise, not really knowing what's going on, but everyone knows it's very tiring. It's an exercise where you dig a lot of holes in the ground to live in. You dig solidly for 48 hours. You do not stop. You don't sleep, you eat, but you keep on going. After 48 hours, you are exhausted and you're mentally exhausted. And that's the key. After 48 hours of solid physical labor, you'll start being given mental tasks to perform. It's impossible. You cannot do them. I remember hallucinating so badly during it that I saw giant rabbits bouncing towards me. A task that should have taken half an hour took us 3 hours. We were just bouncing out some wire and we couldn't organize ourselves to do it. And the point at the end of the exercise, after you're kept awake for another day, so you've been heading up towards sort of 3 days without any sleep, you start falling asleep when you stop paying attention. You start just falling over because you're so tired. And the point they're making to you is you cannot work if you're exhausted. It is a failure in your own leadership if you let yourself get so tired that you can't command. If you ever let your soldiers get that tired, we'll remove you from your job. You've got to feed them. You've got to give them water. They've got to get rest. You can't work them 24 hours a day. In the military, the way that you're taught in the British Army, the officers eat last. The soldiers eat first, then the corporals, then the sergeants, then the officers. And officers always eat last. There's 2 reasons for that. It shows the soldiers that you care about them. And if there's not enough food, you can go without because they're probably working physically harder than you are. So that's tough love, but it's also about looking after the resources you have. And this economy of effort, turning it off, turning it off, and looking after the resources that you have. So I've got one more point to make for you, and then we'll come to an end. So does anyone know who this gentleman is? That's making me think I need to add some different people. I did this for an American group last week, that's why.
Colin Powell.
Colin Powell, wonderful, great guy, Colin Powell. He came up with something called the 40-70 rule that I'm going to take you through. But the way I'm going to bring it out is by reading a quote to you. And apologies for this, because normally I'd have about 4 screens, and here I've got one balanced on top of a chest of drawers in a hotel room in Coniston. So I know Gus showed you all last week his notes on the wall, and I've got them just there and there on 2 pieces of paper. So I'll just read you this quote, which I've always loved. So this is by a man called Sidney Jarry. So when I was at Sandhurst, Sidney Jarry's book called 18 Platoon was required reading. Sidney Jarry was unusual. He was the only officer to start with a platoon at the start of the World War II and get all the way to the end of the war. There was hardly anyone who did that who survived. He was not a very usual sort of, again, he wasn't a macho character. He was quite an academic. He was so short-sighted, he had to buy a 45 caliber pistol, a big bullet, because he was sure he'd only hit someone maybe once. So he bought a very big pistol, he thought, because his eyesight was so poor. But the soldiers with him loved him because he cared about them. And he was good in the situation. And what he said was this: the battlefield is no place for the perfectionist. Common sense, which develops a finely tuned sense of proportion and balance, must prevail. Snatching success from utter chaos is the name of the game, and you may not recognize success when it comes. Just think about that for the business world at the moment. Imagine a situation where some of those who you anticipate will perform well go to pieces. On the ground, you discover your maps are not accurate. Your supporting tanks are delayed for reason unknown and unexplained to you. Your opposition's firepower is far greater than you anticipated. General chaos exists. If your school and university record have been one of unparalleled success, giving you no experience of failure, you will find yourself at a disadvantage. That's a great quote from him, and it's rather like the sort of Rudyard Kipling poem, isn't it? If you can meet with triumph and disaster, treat those 2 imposters just the same. So he's saying situations are going to be really weird and fluid. And back to what we said at the start, this mission command thing, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So you've got a plan and then you get there and everything's different. There's another quote I'd like to read to you from someone called Lord Harding. What he talks about is judgment here. So Jarry was talking about changing situations, and Harding's going to talk about judging. The next quality that I wish to mention is judgment. You've got to have judgment. You've got to be able to assess values and assess them quickly and under difficult circumstances. And that calls for judgment. And it's only learned by experience and practice. You will never learn to judge and to assess value if you're afraid of making mistakes. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. Now, it's interesting that Jarry and Harding, who wrote 30 years apart, both talked about having the confidence to make a mistake, because you may not have all the information you have available. You're going to have to use your experience to make a decision. And what Colin Powell talked about, his 40-70 rule, what he said was, in a crisis situation, once you have about 40% of the information, you're in a position to start making a decision. At 70%, you've got enough now, you've got to go. Your decision as a leader, based on your experience, is when you think you've got enough. And that's why leaders get paid more. And that's why in the military, they get saluted and called ma'am or sir. And it's because ultimately, when it's tough times, leaders have to step forward. And that's the difference between being a leader and a manager. A manager runs processes. A leader sets direction. So what Powell said has been seen a lot in other worlds. So I've taken here the examples of medical teams have to make crucial decisions immensely quickly. And the guys working with COVID, they're dealing with something they've even never seen before. And they have to do it based on their experience. And the parallels with the business world, for me, are very obvious. It's about thinking fast, pausing, enough time to make the right decision, and then decide, be decisive, and set the direction for your team. There's nothing wrong with changing it later. But if you haven't had the confidence to give your teams enough space to make their own errors, they're not going to be the kind of leaders you need beneath you to make decisions in crisis. So you're ready to make a decision with the small amount of data you have to keep up in a fast changing context. And those are the 5 principles I wanted to share with you. So we had mission command, we talked about at the start. Clearing the net, leading with tough love, economy of effort, 40-70 rule. But a lot of it comes to being clear from the start as to what you want people to achieve and giving them the authority, and you take the responsibility for how they're going to do it. Trust on the big, well, align on the big and trust on the small. Align on the big and trust on the small. Clearing the net, having the confidence to set direction and then stay quiet and only talk when required. Leading with tough love, trust and respect. Economy of effort and marshalling resources, and then making decisions as and when you have to. And I'd love to take some questions if there were any. If I have time, Chris.
Yes, there's time. You've got five minutes or thereabouts. If you want to, let's just grab that and put it into the.
Could I ask Sean a question?
Go ahead.
Go
ahead. Having worked with someone who was in the army,
right,
who is a manager now,
yeah,
not in credit,
right,
because credit managers think and have to be versatile in their thinking,
yeah,
with different situations. One of the comments he made, which has always stuck with me, is if you're in the army, you don't worry about the person next to you. You just got to go man down, carry on.
Right.
You can't go, look, he's hurt, or, you know, what am I going to do? So you've got to be able to block out your emotions and move forward. How does that fit into this model or concept of management and in the structure you explained?
Okay, well, so the question really, as I understood it, the question's around how do you, in the military, people have to be replaceable? Is that the point?
Well, I think it's probably control their emotions. Not let emotions dictate the objective.
Okay, thank you. So being able to be dispassionate enough to make a decision in a crisis.
Yes.
I think that comes down to experience and practice. I don't think the military is alone in that. I don't know how medical teams do it. I don't know how, and I wouldn't normally say nice things about them, I don't know how senior administrators in the NHS are dealing with it at the moment, where they're having to decide, I have a limited amount of resources, and they're knowing the decisions they're making will have serious ramifications for lots of other people in the future, particularly for cancer patients. I think that comes down to the tough love thing as well. I think my answer would be experience and practice, but I don't think it's easy for anyone. But the military doesn't attract psychopaths. It doesn't work for them.
No, I think it's more about controlling and suppressing and using the right emotion at the right time.
I think so. I think so. But that's also about sharing with your team and being open and trusting with everyone. That you being vulnerable when you have to be sometimes, and saying, "I need some help."
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. There's an interesting point that you made at the very last one there about the decision-making piece, which is interesting. And we've seen organisations that have not made the right decisions as part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
And the point that you made was get the information, then pause before you make that decision. And it's that pause that's the important bit.
Certainly is.
We've seen a lot of organisations make essentially the wrong decision. By, as we've said before, furloughing a whole bunch of people and figuring out why the business isn't operating anymore because they jumped too soon or whatever. So that's very interesting. And some of the big companies that made decisions and started to say things early on that didn't really think it through.
Yeah,
they didn't have that moment to pause.
And being inflexible.
Yeah.
And not you talked earlier on about face masks. Of just going, that was it. We've changed our policy. We changed it because of this. It's now this.
Yeah.
And not explaining to people why.
Yeah. Any other questions for Sean?
Yeah, Chris, I've got a question for Sean. Sean, do you think there's such a thing as a natural born leader, or do you think you can train yourself to be a leader?
So thank you, Alan. The question was around, are there natural born leaders and can they be developed? Some personality types find leading more enjoyable than others. That's a fact. I believe you can develop people's leadership potential through a lot of practice and through a lot of development. Some people aren't ever going to be natural leaders, and some people who want to be leaders aren't leaders. I think you can develop people's leadership talents, but I think some people have more than others, being completely truthful, Alan. Is that an okay answer?
That's a perfect answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. I'm going to I'm going to stop recording in a second, then we'll finish off. So thanks very much, Sean. I'll just stop recording now, and we can carry on the conversation shortly afterwards.